unprecedented bombshell in the Charlie Kirk murder case. America's favorite widow just invoked a legal right in her husband's murder case that is usually reserved for the guy in handcuffs. I thought I misunderstood it. I did not. I'm not a lawyer, but most of my friends are. And even they are like, this is a little...
So Alex Acosta was the U.S. Attorney of South Florida at the time, and he cut what's known as the sweetheart plea deal. And here's the insane part. Epstein's lawyers would literally edit the changes and then cross out the changes and send it back and say, Epstein's not going to plead to this unless you agree to this. And they were bartering with Alexander Acosta, the U.S. Attorney at the time in South Florida, trying to get the best deal for Epstein. So then October of 2007, Epstein finally pleads in state court and he got 18 months in county jail. That was his sentencing. He served 13 of those months, but he got to leave during the workday to go to work at his office.
They got this deal with the military. They worked with the military in Romania to help orphans, okay? Now, it is a fact that they worked with, at that time, Colonel Otto Buscher. Colonel Otto Buscher was then accused of running a brothel with young children, taking them onto the military base for himself, his needs. A woman filed in Romania and said this is what's actually happening.
What if I told you that the widow of a murdered political figure just hired the same lawyer who once defended Jeffrey Epstein's protector? And what if I also told you this happened right after damaging documents from Romania started circulating again? You're about to discover a web of connections so disturbing that it will change everything you thought you knew about this case. The assassination of Charlie Kirk sent shockwaves through America, but what happened next has left investigators scratching their heads and the public demanding answers. His widow, Erika Kirk, made a series of legal moves that have raised more questions than they've answered. And when you connect the dots between her mysterious past in Romania, her choice of attorney, and the timing of certain document leaks, a pattern emerges that nobody wants to talk about. But before we dive into this rabbit hole, I need you to understand something crucial. The people involved in this story have resources, connections, and influence that most of us can only imagine. They operate in circles where favors are traded like currency and where the truth often becomes the first casualty. So as we unpack this together, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. Why would someone who claims to want justice be in such a hurry to limit the investigation? Let me take you back to where this story really begins. Not in Utah, where Charlie Kirk was shot, but thousands of miles away in Romania. Years before Erika became the grieving widow we see on television, she was a young woman with big ambitions and even bigger connections. At just 17 years old, she founded something called Everyday Heroes Like You, and by 19, she had launched a project that would later come back to haunt her, Romanian Angels. Now, the official story sounds innocent enough. Romanian Angels was supposedly created to bring gifts from American soldiers to Romanian orphanages. Heartwarming, right? But here's where things get uncomfortable, and I mean really uncomfortable. This charity didn't operate just anywhere in Romania. It was specifically focused on Constanta, a city located less than 10 miles from a NATO military base that had already been flagged in investigations involving minors. And Erika wasn't working alone. In promotional videos that are still floating around online, she publicly thanked a U.S. military commander named Colonel Otto Buscher for his support. Remember that name, because it's going to come up again in ways that will make your skin crawl. Colonel Buscher wasn't just any military officer. Romanian media later accused him of running operations involving young girls near that very NATO base where Romanian Angels was operating. Think about this for a moment. You have a charity that claims to help children operating near a military base, partnering with an officer later accused of exploiting minors. But it gets worse. Romanian Angels didn't just work with random military personnel. They partnered directly with the U.S. Marines, creating a triangle of overlap that should concern anyone paying attention. A charity moving children, a NATO base under scrutiny, and a military officer later facing serious accusations. But here's the part that really bothers me. Romanian Angels quietly disappeared around 2015, right as Romanian journalists began reporting on missing children connected to foreign adoption agencies and military-linked organizations. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? When investigators start asking questions about missing children, your charity suddenly vanishes from public view. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like something out of a conspiracy thriller, I don't blame you. But these aren't theories we're dealing with. These are documented facts, public records, and media reports from Romania that paint a picture nobody wants to acknowledge. And if you're wondering why this matters now, just wait until you see how all of this connects to what happened after Charlie Kirk was murdered.
Her filing invokes Utah's Crime Victims' Rights Act. Now, what this is it gives victims the right to a speedy disposition of criminal charges, meaning the case can't be delayed endlessly if the delays are being driven by the defense. Normally, when we talk about speedy trial rights, we're talking about the defendant's constitutional right, but Utah law adds a second layer. Victims are statutorily protected from unwarranted delay caused by or at the request of the defense.
After the assassination, Erika Kirk became the public face of grief and justice. She appeared on news programs, gave interviews, and positioned herself as the victim seeking answers. But then she did something that legal experts are calling unprecedented and frankly bizarre. She filed for a speedy trial against Tyler Robinson, the accused shooter. Now, you might be thinking, what's wrong with wanting justice quickly? Let me explain why this is so unusual and why it should concern all of us. The right to a speedy trial is enshrined in the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution, but here's the key detail everyone seems to be missing. This right belongs exclusively to the accused, not to the victims. It exists to protect defendants from sitting in jail indefinitely while prosecutors build their case. Victims have rights in criminal proceedings, absolutely, but formally invoking speedy trial protections this early in a homicide case is extremely rare. In fact, most families want the opposite. They want investigators to have all the time they need to uncover every piece of evidence, interview every witness, and build the strongest possible case. A speedy trial doesn't just move the calendar forward, it freezes the scope of the investigation. It limits how long prosecutors can chase new leads, makes it harder to issue new subpoenas, complicates financial discovery, and makes it more difficult to bring in third-party witnesses who might have crucial information. So why would someone claiming to want justice actually limit the investigation? Erika's attorney, Jeffrey Epstein, argues that the defense team is intentionally stalling, but according to prosecutors, about 90% of the discovery process has already been completed. The defense's delay tactics might be questionable, but they're not unusual in high-profile cases. What is unusual is a victim demanding speed, when speed could actually hurt the case. But here's where this story takes a turn that will blow your mind. The attorney Erika chose to represent her isn't just any lawyer. Jeffrey Epstein has a very specific and very troubling background. In 2025, just months before taking on Erika's case, Epstein represented Alex Acosta. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Acosta is the former U.S. attorney who negotiated Jeffrey Epstein's infamous sweetheart plea deal back in 2008. Let that sink in for a moment. The same lawyer now standing beside Erika Kirk in her husband's assassination case is the same lawyer who once defended the man responsible for protecting Jeffrey Epstein from justice. And if you think that's a coincidence, you haven't been paying attention to how these networks operate. Epstein's 2008 plea deal is considered one of the biggest failures in modern criminal justice. Despite facing federal charges that could have resulted in life in prison, Epstein received just 18 months in county jail, and he was allowed to leave during work hours to go to his office. The deal also included immunity for co-conspirators, effectively shutting down any investigation into his network of associates and clients. Acosta didn't just roll over for Epstein's legal team. Documents later revealed that Epstein's lawyers would literally edit proposed plea agreements, cross out parts they didn't like, and send them back with demands for better terms. They were bargaining with a federal prosecutor like they were negotiating a business contract, and Acosta went along with it every step of the way.
Now, the same lawyer who defended Acosta when this scandal exploded is representing Erika Kirk at the exact moment when her Romania connections are resurfacing, and the timing of his involvement is suspicious to say the least. Right before Neiman appeared on the scene, leaked documents began circulating again. These weren't new revelations, but old materials getting fresh attention. Tax filings, donation records, and board connections that people had forgotten about. One particularly damaging document that resurfaced was a 2010 filing showing that Romanian Angels received money from a foundation that shared board members with a trust that appeared in Epstein-related client files. Now, I'm not saying this proves direct connections, but when you're trying to distance yourself from certain associations, having your charity linked to Epstein's financial network, even indirectly, is not helpful. And there's another detail about Erika's background that makes her choice of attorney even more revealing. She didn't start Romanian Angels in a vacuum. Her family has deep connections to government and defense contracting. Her father ran operations for Raytheon in Israel, and her mother worked with Homeland Security and defense-linked technology.
So apparently we need to talk about what speedy trial actually means. The Sixth Amendment's right to a speedy trial belongs exclusively to the accused, the person facing criminal charges. It exists to protect defendants from sitting in jail or living under the cloud of prosecution indefinitely.
Companies. This isn't a family of political outsiders. These are people who understand how power works and how to protect it. So let's put this timeline together, because when you see it all laid out, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Romanian Angels operates near a NATO base during a period when Romanian journalists are reporting on missing children connected to foreign operations. The charity partners with U.S. Marines and publicly thanks a commander who is later accused of exploiting minors. When journalists start asking questions, the charity quietly shuts down and disappears from public view. Years later, Charlie Kirk is assassinated, and Erika becomes the sympathetic widow seeking justice. But when documents about her Romania activities start circulating again, she suddenly hires Jeffrey Epstein, a lawyer whose specialty isn't winning trials, but managing damage control for powerful people with dangerous secrets. Think about what Epstein brings to this case. He's not a celebrity attorney who gets clients acquitted in front of cameras. He's the kind of lawyer you hire when the real risk isn't the current legal proceeding, but what investigators might uncover if they start digging into your past. He's a specialist in making problems go away quietly, in negotiating deals that keep certain information from seeing the light of day. And that brings us back to the speedy trial demand. When someone with Erika's background, represented by someone with Neiman's expertise, demands that a murder investigation be rushed, they're not asking for justice. They're trying to control what doesn't get time to surface. They're putting pressure on the system to focus on the immediate facts of the shooting and avoid any broader investigation that might uncover uncomfortable connections. The media coverage of this case has been frustrating to watch because most outlets are treating Erika's legal strategy as if it's normal behavior from a grieving widow. They're not asking the obvious questions about why someone would want to limit the investigation into their spouse's murder. They're not examining her background or her attorney's history. They're certainly not connecting the dots between Romania, Epstein's network, and the current case. But you know who is paying attention? The online community of researchers and investigators who don't rely on mainstream media for their information. They've been circulating those Romanian Angels documents, mapping the connections between board members and foundations, and asking the questions that professional journalists seem afraid to touch. These independent researchers have noticed something else that mainstream media has ignored: the complete absence of Romanian Angels from current internet searches. The organization's website has been scrubbed, social media accounts deleted, and promotional videos removed from platforms where they once appeared. For a charity that supposedly helped children, there's remarkably little digital footprint remaining. This kind of systematic erasure doesn't happen by accident. It requires resources, technical expertise, and the kind of influence that can make things disappear from the internet.
It's the digital equivalent of what we've seen with Epstein's network. When powerful people want to bury information, they have the means to do it. But here's what they can't erase: government documents, tax filings, and media reports from Romanian journalists who covered these stories in real time. These materials are still accessible to anyone willing to look, and they paint a picture that contradicts the innocent narrative we're being sold about Erika Kirk's charitable work. The accusations against Colonel Busher, for example, weren't minor allegations that disappeared quietly. Romanian media reported extensively on claims that he was running operations involving young girls, using his position at the NATO base to facilitate activities that should horrify anyone with a conscience. The fact that Romanian Angels publicly thanked this man and partnered with his operations raises questions that go beyond coincidence.
Pay attention to this thank you message at the end that thanks Colonel Busher, because his name is going to come up again.
And let's talk about the broader context here, because this isn't happening in isolation. We're living in an era where connections between powerful people, military operations, and child exploitation have been exposed in case after case. From Epstein's Island to NXIVM to various international trafficking networks, we've learned that these operations often hide behind legitimate-sounding organizations, charities, foundations, and humanitarian projects that provide cover for activities that would be impossible to conduct in the open. Romanian Angels fits this pattern perfectly. A young, well-connected American woman starts a charity that ostensibly helps orphan children in a foreign country. She partners with military personnel and operates near strategic locations. When questions arise, the organization disappears, and years later, when those questions resurface, she hires a lawyer whose expertise is protecting powerful people from dangerous revelations. The speedy trial demand makes sense in this context because it's not about getting justice for Charlie Kirk. It's about preventing a prolonged investigation that might uncover information that certain people desperately want to keep buried. Remember, criminal investigations don't just focus on the immediate crime. They examine the backgrounds of everyone involved, their financial records, their associations, and their histories. A thorough investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination might inevitably lead investigators to examine his wife's past activities, and that's apparently something that cannot be allowed to happen. Now, I know some of you are thinking this sounds too conspiratorial, too connected to be believable. But consider this: if these connections are innocent, why the extraordinary efforts to hide them? If Romanian Angels was just a legitimate charity helping children, why was it scrubbed from the internet? If Colonel Busher was just a regular military officer providing standard support, why were Romanian journalists reporting such serious allegations against him? And most importantly, if Erika Kirk just wants justice for her murdered husband, why is she working so hard to limit the investigation that could provide it? The answers to these questions should concern all of us because they reveal how power actually works in our society and how justice gets manipulated by people with the resources and connections to control the narrative. The Charlie Kirk assassination should be investigated thoroughly, with every lead followed and every connection examined. Tyler Robinson, if he's guilty, should face the full consequences of his actions. But the investigation shouldn't stop there, and it shouldn't be rushed to completion just because someone with a questionable past and a damage control attorney demands it. We deserve to know the truth about Romanian Angels, about its connections to accused military personnel, and about how it ties into the broader network of organizations that have been exposed in recent years. We deserve to understand why documents keep getting scrubbed from the internet, and why certain lawyers seem to specialize in representing people connected to these networks. Most importantly, we deserve a justice system that isn't manipulated by powerful people who can afford attorneys skilled in making problems disappear. The demand for a speedy trial in this case isn't about justice, it's about control, and it's about preventing the kind of thorough investigation that might reveal truths that certain people will do anything to keep hidden. But here's what gives me hope.
You're watching this video, which means you're not content to accept the sanitized version of events that mainstream media is serving up. You're asking questions, connecting dots, and demanding real answers. And that's exactly what we need more of, because the only way to counter these networks of power and influence is through an informed public that refuses to be satisfied with convenient lies. If this story has opened your eyes to connections you hadn't seen before, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because this is exactly the kind of investigative content that gets shadow banned and suppressed. Your subscription tells the algorithm that people want to see real journalism, not corporate propaganda. Second, share this video with everyone you know who cares about truth and justice. The mainstream media won't cover these connections, so it's up to us to make sure this information reaches the people who need to see it. Every share is a vote against the censorship that keeps these stories buried. And third, start doing your own research into the connections we've discussed today. Look up Romanian Angels in archived web pages, find those old tax filings, and read what Romanian journalists reported about Colonel Busher. Don't take my word for anything. Verify it yourself, because when you see these documents with your own eyes, you'll understand just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Obviously, we know that Erika Kirk began the Romanian Angels project in late 2012, early 2013, through to 2015. And obviously, you have seen all the TikToks describing the scandal.
The people involved in this story are counting on your apathy, your willingness to accept simple explanations for complex situations, and your reluctance to ask uncomfortable questions. They're betting that you'll move on to the next story, the next scandal, the next distraction. But if you're still watching this video, you've already proven them wrong. We're living in a time when the truth is under attack from every direction, when powerful people can scrub their histories from the internet and hire lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. But we're also living in a time when independent researchers and citizen journalists can uncover connections that would have remained hidden just a few years ago. The question is, which side of this information war are you going to be on? The Charlie Kirk assassination is just one piece of a much larger puzzle, and Erika Kirk's connections to Romania, Epstein's network, and damage control attorneys is just one thread in a web that extends far beyond this single case. But every thread matters, every connection counts, and every person who refuses to accept convenient lies brings us closer to the truth. So don't let them rush this investigation. Don't let them control the narrative. And don't let them convince you that asking questions makes you a conspiracy theorist. The real conspiracy is the coordinated effort to keep you from asking those questions in the first place. Your willingness to think critically, to research independently, and to share what you discover is the greatest threat they face. Thank you for watching, thank you for thinking, and thank you for refusing to accept easy answers to complicated questions.
Proved even more once he was assassinated.
So in Utah, Erika Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, just filed something powerful in the criminal case against the man accused of unaliving her husband, Tyler Robinson.
Nobody is buying a single word of Erika Kirk. Nobody.
The truth is out there, but it's up to us to find it, share it, and demand that it be acknowledged. Together, we can ensure that justice isn't just for people who can afford the best lawyers, and that investigations aren't limited by the demands of those who have the most to hide.